By the spring of 2013 or so, let's say just a few months after the shooting, by that point, you had gone from theory to just straight up telling your audience Sandy Hook was staged and the evidence is overwhelming.
Objection is the form.
Correct?
But what does staged mean?
I'm just asking you what you were telling your audience.
No,
I'm not answering your questions, Mr. Jones. You're going to tell me what stage means when you said it.
It was inevitable. Like the passage of time or the soiling of Gorka's undercarriage.
And the Kraken has been unleashed.
All things must pass. Creatures inexplicably linked through the cosmos, destined to collide and repel each other until the very atoms that make up existence slowly separate into a cold and lifeless galaxy.
Your entire head.
Joe Rogan and Alex Jones began to battle. It started out small, like the faint whispers cascading across a field moments before blood is spilt. Two best friends devolved into bitter rivals before our very eyes.
Yeah, Alex did that. That was real. That was legit. And it was very informative because I didn't know that is how the government operated sometimes.
It wasn't entirely unexpected, however, and the moments preceding it had been developing for some time. It started in August of 2018. Apple drew first blood and banned InfoWars from their platform. Then came Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, LinkedIn, MailChimp, Angry Birds, and finally, Twitter. Jones and his particular brand of journalism was being expunged from every corner of the internet. The usual song and dance about free speech was levied by the typical charlatans.
We live in the freest, greatest society that there is. I would not want to live in any other country. I'm a married gay man. I don't want any extra credit for it. I wanted equal rights. Now I got it. And now I want to be able to vote the way anyone else.
And let me ask you this. Have you gotten a bunch of hate from right-wingers for that?
No. I mean, the truth is I have.
No! He got a husband? No! 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 I'm melting! I did not know I was in his presence. I didn't know. I shook his hand.
But due to Jones being a little too loose with the whole blame grieving parents for their fake dead children thing, most didn't choose it as their gay frog-ridden hill to die on. Relegated to his own network and a slew of differently named channels like Resistance News in New Zealand, the isolation of being persona non-gay frogga began to set in.
Please let us back on Twitter. Google, let us back on. We're sorry, frogs are not gay. Atrazine is good. InfoWars bad.
Joe had been critical of Alex for some time preceding this.
I've always had good dealings with Alex in person to person. But he's obviously in a world of shit right now. There's a lot going on with him with this Sandy Hook stuff. And he wasn't entirely honest with me about what he had said about Sandy Hook. Maybe he didn't remember. Maybe he was trying to phrase it in a way other than the way I interpreted it when I saw the videos. But there's a Media Matters video that shows all the time where he said that Sandy Hook was fake.
I shook his hand!
In a 2017 podcast with Griff Rubin, he stated that he had been critical of Jones' Sandy Hook truthering and claims he didn't know about it when he had Jones on his show earlier that same year. Fast forward to February of 2019, where Joe Rogan hosted Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey on his show.
What do you do, though, to balance the conversation, or what responsibility do you think you have to balance the conversation in terms of the way conservatives view it versus the way liberals and progressives view it?
There's sports Twitter, there's black Twitter, There's food Twitter. There's undersea Twitter. There's space Twitter. And so people keep talking about, how there's white nationalist stuff in political Twitter and people being mean there. But then who's to say what white nationalist Twitter is under the sea? What's a white nationalist there? What's a space nationalist?
Right, like in terms of downranking, is there a discussion as to whether or not this person's reply should be downranked? Like, how do you figure that out?
So we depend wholly on deep thinking AI, as we call it, but I call it something special. It's called a memory accrued modular algorithm, which I call MAMA.
Who is to decide, other than people, whether or not something is valid?
Mama doesn't like people when they're being mean to people, except for white people. Mama doesn't mind when white people are being mean. Mama hates when people are mean to white people or dolphins. Mama loves dolphins.
Like, how do you decide that?
We believe in having a dialogue all over the world. That's the core of this. Mama likes to give her digital breast milk to everybody, but some people are so naughty that they just don't deserve any digital breast milk.
In some ways, what Twitter is doing is it's really kind of, it's flavoring the public narrative.
I feel so much better. I'm stronger. I feel just so much more virile. I've changed the way I sleep and eat. Now I only eat once every fortnight, usually a few dried raisins. They're delicious.
And I wonder what is the next stage of this.
I try to only sleep in a fresh whale's placenta.
We've said before that Joe Rogan isn't known for his investigative journalism. He brings his guests on to have a conversation for a few hours and ideally experience as many DMT-less mind explosions as he can in a given time. So Jack delivered his usual cavalcade of corporate proclamations, and Joe smiled and kept the conversation flowing. To Joe's fans, this was an unforgivable transgression. Twitter was ground zero for censoring free speech to many of them, and they were devastated their senpai wasn't grilling the bird wizard, with over 84,000 people expressing their disgust. We can't prove this, so we're just going to say that it's unequivocal fact.
This is declassified, by the way. I'm not saying things that are my opinion.
That one of those downvotes was Alex Jones, who then drew second blood.
I've really thought about this, and I can't not be quiet about the Joe Rogan situation because it's tragic, and it's in our time. The real story has to be told, and then it's not fair of me to send him a text message a week ago saying, you say one more damn thing off of George Soros' talking point, I'm going to come after you. Nope, let's just do it. I think that's probably going to be better.
Alex went on his show to launch a series of attacks where he claimed that Joe was acting as a mouthpiece for Dorsey because one of their apps is a sponsor of the Joe Rogan podcast. This would quickly accelerate, as only an Alex Jones fever dream knows how to do, and evolve into saying that Joe Rogan is a Soros-funded puppet of the grand globalist conspiracy.
They just don't understand how it works. They don't understand how the teeth bite. They don't understand the shape of doom. They just don't understand it.
Like a snowball of why are we talking about this being slowly rolled down a hill of feces, it grew until it became a war of words.
My apology as a human being to Alex Jones. If you were hurt that I didn't have you back on the show, if you were hurt that I occasionally poke fun at you, I have to. You're hilarious, unfortunately. But I don't hate you.
When I get my hands around your neck and all of your fake so-called male prowess, you will understand and you will know.
Joe taking time to declare how sad Alex had become and that he only wanted to be allowed back on the podcast, while Alex would ramp up his deranged man on a bus routine and begin spouting vitriol faster than you can say Brain Force Plus.
I mean, Joe Rogan built his entire podcast on selling his version of the exact same product. You gonna go after Joe Rogan too?
Things turned ugly, and Alex began leaking his secret tapes of Joe Rogan making racist remarks.
We can't go to there. So I go, you got to go to one where there's Planet of the Apes, man. We're going to go see Planet of the Apes. So I look on the iPhone app, and it says, okay, take me to this one. And the guy goes, okay. I go, is that in a good neighborhood? He's like, oh, yeah. Guy barely speaks English. He takes us there. We get out, and we're giggling. Oh, we're gonna go see Planet of the Apes. We walk into Planet of the Apes. We walked into Africa, dude. We walked in the door, and there was no white people. Planet of the Apes didn't take place in Africa.
Which were just early clips of his podcast rather than secret tapes, but tinfoil potato, tinfoil potato. Eventually, things were boiling to the climax where we genuinely thought we would be seeing the two men settle their differences in the octagon.
I challenge him $1 million, the charity he wants, to get in the ring with me, bare knuckle. I'll get in the ring with you, and I will break your jaw, I will knock your teeth out, I will break your nose, and I will break your neck.
Which most of humanity collectively responded with,
Let them fight.
and then it happened.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
So, since we made our first Joe Rogan video, quite a bit has happened in the world. Laura Loomer and Jacob Wohl have both left the Twitter platform to go find greener pastures elsewhere. We had our entire YouTube channel taken down and then brought back to life, thanks to an awesome grassroots campaign, #SurfsUp. Joe Rogan went on to feature a plethora of intellectual dark guests. And unfortunately, a lot of what Rebecca Lewis and others had been pointing out regarding online culture was starting to come horrifically true.
It hit close to home, and reading the news about it was like a gut punch, you know. It was awful. I think because, as with other people who have been in these spaces, this was exactly what we had been worrying about. And in fact, it kind of reflected similar cases of violence at smaller scales, but still there were other cases of violence before this that seem to have, at least in part, been informed by YouTube content that had been consumed. But what I started to realize as I was delving into this world is it wasn't just the algorithm. I mean, the algorithm plays a huge role, of course, but I really started focusing on the role that guest appearances played and collaborations played, because that actually isn't, you know, it's not kind of built into the architecture of the platform, but it's such a key part of YouTube culture. One of the issues with it is that it doesn't grapple with the fact that things like propaganda exist, right? Like this assumption that it's always going to be kind of the most rational and reasonable argument that comes to the fore, that just isn't what historically has played out. I don't think that content moderation is always the best way to grapple with these issues. I think that there's a perverse set of incentives where content creators are often incentivized to make kind of incendiary and at times bigoted content. And I think that platforms need to grapple with that.
The first thing we should do is respond to some of the criticisms levied against our first Joe Rogan video. No, not the poopy ones written by Kaka Poople. The ones that were at least attempting to be in good faith. The most frequent being some form of, Joe Rogan has a diverse selection of guests on his show, and you've just been cherry-picking the conservative ones. So, looking at the direct data of his podcast for the past 400 episodes since 2016, Election Day, Joe Rogan has featured prominent left-wing guests Kyle Kulinski and Abby Martin twice on his show. They are the only two left-wing guests who have been invited twice. Jimmy Dore could be considered a third, however he also hovers in the conspiracy theory territory and is presented as a comedian. Conversely, in the same period, Joe Rogan had Jordan Peterson on 6 times, Brett Weinstein on 4 times, Sam Harris on 3 times, Dave Rubin on twice, Tim Pool twice, Gad Saad twice, Alex Jones twice, Steven Crowder twice, and Michael Malice twice. Not to mention, he also featured Candace Owens, Ted Nugent, Roseanne Barr, Douglas Murray, Peter Boghossian, Sargon Ricard, Scott Adams, Ben Shapiro, and Gavin McInnes.
So these are gays, these are lesbians. I think a higher proportion of lesbians are that way from getting molested. And it's easier to go with a woman because they're not as gross as cocks.
Right.
His ratio, according to both his own podcast and website, is approximately 9-1. Media Matters also discovered a disturbing trend regarding the genders of his guest stars. Women are represented only 10% of the time. Now, before you rush to the comments already that it's his show and he can do whatever he wants, you're damn right he can. But you should also look at these numbers and recognize the narrative being crafted by its host.
Yeah, it's a fun time.
It will then be reflected in his fan base. Most disliked episodes of that same time frame are, unsurprisingly, Liza Schlesinger, Abby Martin, Corinne Fisher and Natasha Leggero. The most frequent accusation was that we are actually just as bad because we've introduced people to the concept of the alternative influence network through our video, thereby indoctrinating them down the pipeline already. After all, Destiny is in the same study you mentioned, so shouldn't he be just as bad? In fact, an updated, more complex network of YouTube personalities actually features us in it. Aw, thanks guys, looks like we made it. Unfortunately, this is all classic whataboutism, because Destiny is not hosting figures like Sargon of Akkad on his show to have a friendly chat between bros. He brings them on there to ridicule their beliefs and deprogram youth who may have swallowed too many multicolored pills.
Destiny was really the only true ideological outlier, I think, that ended up in that graph, just because he has debated more far-right people than anyone else, and therefore, based on that methodology, kind of ended up in the graph.
What do you mean, make sure she stays safe?
And yes, even we are now part of the all-holy algorithm. We may be a small part, but we're still a part. To understand how the algorithm works, you need to understand its aims. They're simple: to keep you glued to your screen for as long as possible. What makes you as a viewer watch content on the site for as long as possible without ever averting your gaze. One of the reasons so many anti-SJW and right-wing personalities gamed the system was they were uploading exceptionally long reactionary videos with very little production necessary on the other side. Viewers starved for this content would devour these crude videos and keep their feed suggesting more and more potentially radical content as long as it kept the viewer watching.
Sympathy! I want sympathy!
Things have changed since our last video, however. The dangers of figures like Ben Shapiro radicalizing their fan base through fear have become all too real. Since then, YouTube has gone to extreme lengths to try and clean up their platform.
Okay guys, the first thing that you need to know is that the internet is amazing and it's changing every day. Once you've learned how to get online yourselves, you'll start seeing web pages everywhere. TV shows have them, schools, Disney World, even the White House.
What's a web page? Something ducks walk on?
Ha ha, very funny.
Over the past year, YouTube has spent substantial resources on trying to clean up its platform. It's invested in news organizations and committed to promoting only authoritative news outlets on its homepage during breaking news events. It's partnered with companies like Wikipedia to fact-check common conspiracy theories, and it's even spent millions of dollars sponsoring video creators who promote social good. The problem is, YouTube's recommendation algorithm has been trained over the years to give users more of what it thinks they want.
Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice. After an apparent few texts back and forth and a hug it out bro session, Joe Rogan and Alex Jones were ready to hit the town. And boy, did they ever.
I got promiscuous when I was pretty young, like 12. And she goes, I'll have sex with you. This is a true story. I'll have sex with you if you let me put makeup on you. So I'm not into gay stuff or anything. So the girl puts the makeup on me and I have sex with her. And she's super hot. And then like a week later, she goes, now I'm going to choke you out.
Shut up.
The plan.
You're going
to
the
ice wall. Listen, he's the ambassador for flat Earth. The problem is I got Alzheimer's now. I don't care if it's Ethiopian or if it's Mexican or if it's German. If the food's good and the people are nice, I love it. Like a women, like I love black women, I love white women, I love Hispanic women. I love them all. Like if the woman's cool, like I know a bunch of black women that are bitches, black women that are cool.
What about Swedish bitches?
I love them all. The point is, let's just say I'm super gay. You didn't give in to the pressuring of the threat. It was more of the nagging, like a siren, like a bitching woman, not against women. But in these dreams, I go way out to the edge of the universe. He'd be like, I was like, it's a gay dude, like sitting there on his side like this. The tobacco was amazing, by the way.
It's pretty good stuff.
It's men, they're killing already more kids, so you're telling me it isn't real when they had a vote in the goddamn Senate? I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm kind of retarded.
On February 27th, 2019, a live stream of the Joe Rogan Experience with Alex Jones was re-unleashed onto the mainstream with a live viewing audience of over 300,000 people, and to date, the video has racked up over 13 million views. Joe was careful to hold his buddy's hand through the atonement process and graciously skipped over the walk of shame for his friend. After milking the proper dead children apologia from Jones, it was time to let the rabid mongoose out of his cage for all to see. Regardless of what side of the aisle you land on, it's pretty apparent why Joe thought this was a good idea. For hours on end, taking breaks only to relieve their booze-filled bladders, Jones went on a tirade of the Jonesiest order. Not missing out on the prestigious soapbox he was now provided, he let his stream of consciousness vomit up everything from castrating monk testicles to the inherent racist groupthink present in Aboriginal cultures. There was little, if any, pushback from Joe, who spent most of the episode buzzed and laughing hysterically, as I'm sure most of his audience was. He brought along Eddie Bravo, noted flat earther, seemingly as a buffer to Jones, who only seemed to antagonize him into a fury over the fact that politicians are campaigning for the legalization of post-birth abortions.
They're killing unborn babies!
The whole thing was a car crash of the most beneficial magnitude. Audiences on all sides of the political spectrum couldn't look away, and why would you? It was hypnotizing. Alex left the experience revitalized, and the public was left wondering if the entire thing had been an elaborate hoax. Even the strange racist rants didn't slow Jones down.
I'm part Native American, only like 6% Comanche, and Texas, and just that little bit makes me wild.
Yeah.
And so they can get them because they're powerful, they're smart, they're neat, they're cool, but genetically they go into groupthink really, really fast.
Who took to email several days later to respond to his bizarre statements on Native Americans.
I myself am at least 6% Native American, and I am proud of my heritage. I was speaking in general about how Germans follow orders and are very groupthink once the war starts. How Native Americans do it, it is well known, but particularly with the Chinese, the Vietnamese, etc. All groups go into groupthink once they are in a war, but it is in particular with certain groups, and historians have noted that. But have fun with your political correctness or whatever.
And that was that. He left as lengthily as he came and succeeded in being one of the top trending stories on Twitter that day, a platform from which he was banished. The episode was a fantastic success for both him and Joe, who then plotted his next move. Looking to undo the damage his Jack Dorsey episode had caused, he created a sequel that couldn't possibly disappoint the fans. Inviting Jack back on his show, he armed himself with a fan favorite, reactionary YouTube right-winger parading around as a journalist, Tim Pool. Pool created a name for himself as a reporter for Vice during the Occupy movement. Since then, he's grown 2 successful YouTube channels that often parrot alt-right talking points while constantly attempting to define himself as a centrist.
According to Right Wing Watch, white nationalists have adopted the clown as their latest symbol of racism. Anyone using the clown symbol is clearly a white nationalist.
The path he took is one that is not so uncommon when it comes to figures like Tim, who, purports to be socially progressive, whatever, but spends 95% of his time on YouTube hammering the media and hammering the left over things that, oftentimes don't make a ton of sense. It's unfounded allegations. It's just yelling at some news article. If I was going to pull up a Tim Pool video on my phone right now and just walk down the street and play a video for somebody and I say, hey, you think that guy's right wing or left wing or somewhere in the middle? They'd probably say right wing because the criticisms come from that side almost exclusively. This is a company that deserves a ton of public scrutiny and earns every ounce of it, and we should be skeptical and demand accountability from corporations. That's a very that's a good thing to do. But the way he did it echoed those sentiments, right? It's why does this only happen to right-wing people? And apparently he has never heard of a little channel called The Serfs. They will tell you over and over again that by reframing the center and shifting that quote-unquote Overton window, you allow political discourse and discussion to shift, to one side of the spectrum and, bringing these fringe ideas and rhetorical devices and that sort of thing into acceptable discourse, which ultimately changes the trajectory of politics.
A free speech warrior, perhaps too beanie-prone to be considered an inductee into the intellectual dark web, he nonetheless was a perfect figurehead to challenge the Bird Empire. Jack was wise to bring his policy manager Vijay Gadde along with him, and with that Rogan was prepared for his redemption arc. Tim Pool was caged in the corner until Joe Rogan was ready to unleash him on the fully suspecting Twitter tag team.
Get into that statement you made about misinformation and whether or not you'll police it. So
I think that the tough part of this is really, and
love to have a discussion about this is, do you really want corporations to police what's true and not true?
Absolutely not.
That's a really, really tough position
But
to
you
put
guys
us
do
in.
that.
We try not to do that. We don't want to do that.
But
The
you
place-
do in your rules.
It's so hard to discern what Mama can't tell exactly what a white nationalist is. It's so hard. We're just having an open dialogue under the sea.
Tim, what do you mean by that?
Dead naming
what
and
specifically?
misgendering.
Dead naming and misgendering.
Yeah. That's a specific ideology that's unique to a very small faction of people in this world that you guys actually ban people for.
So the way I think of it is it's behavior based. And I know you think of it as content, and we can disagree on this point. But this is about, why are you doing this to a trans person? Why are you calling them by this name when they've chosen to go by a different name? Or why are you outing them in some way? Like, what is your intent and purpose behind that?
We had some moderators, and we still do, but we depend on computers.
Right. So you're not banning people for targeted trans-speciesing others, right?
If you look at free expression and free speech laws around the world, they're not absolute. They're not absolute. There's always limitations on what you can say, and it's when you're starting to endanger other people.
Well, of course. Of course, Twitter is going to enforce the social justice aspect of their policy immediately.
Well, it doesn't matter what I feel. I don't feel much of anything ever. It's what Mama feels. I don't even know what I'm really doing most of the time. I'm so tired.
And abuse me all day and night. You don't do anything about that.
But this is about, are you doing something with the intention of abusing and harassing a trans person on the platform? And are they viewing it that way and reporting it to us so that we take action?
Ben Shapiro went on a talk show and absolutely refused. And that's his shtick, and he's one of the biggest podcasts in the world. So if you have all of his millions upon millions of followers who are looking at this rule saying this goes against my view of the world, and it's literally 60 plus million in this country, you do have a rule that's ideologically bent. And it's true. You did the research. You believe this. Well, then you have Ben Shapiro, who did his research and doesn't believe it.
Yeah. And I relied on the American Association of Pediatrics and, Human Rights Council.
Poole tried desperately to fulfill Rogan's fans' wishes with the narrative that Twitter is unfairly unplatforming conservative users. In his online bubble, his infantile talking points probably resonate as poignant, but in a room surrounded by other adults, he had trouble coming across as anything more than a confused child. Still, it seemed to be what the fans wanted, simply hearing their talking points said directly to the Lord of Foul. The ratio of likes to dislikes was nearly the opposite of Jack's first appearance on the podcast. Meanwhile, Alex Jones was ready to embark on a new dimension. I'm sure not even he saw coming.
What is it like being Alex Jones?
It's awesome.
Appearing on one of YouTube's most popular mistakes, Logan Paul's show.
I'm trying to convince all of you that have bigger audiences than them that you got to be careful and you got to watch out when they're the ones launching fake wars. They're the ones saying mothers and fathers are bad. They're the ones saying break down society. They're the ones saying open up the borders. They're the ones saying we should accept radical Islam. And so there are a lot of declassified and public programs, but also secret programs of people taking high levels of drugs in sensory deprivation tanks to then make contact with aliens. Dude, they've got the spider goats all over the world that create body armor. They've got the human-animal hybrids. They've got everything. I don't know what you're talking. This is all confirmed, man. Your consciousness is a group consciousness. You're an individual as a cell in a group consciousness in a hybrid collective group, like a jellyfish. I don't hate anybody, but it's okay to say men and women exist. It's okay to say there are two primary genders.
He's asking you why you feel it's still okay to use the word retarded.
No. You could say it was a natural fit, given how Logan likes to flirt with being a flat earther. Still, Alex Jones is a living meme, and who can pass up an opportunity to have a few lulls at his expense? Now, I'm sure you're expecting the usual song and dance where we pick apart everything exceptionally problematic with this scenario, that it opened up his audience and reach to millions of new subscribers, most of whom are very young. That the normalization of a man who espouses dangerous, unfounded, and frankly racist conspiracy theories
from the fact that we believe his dad was really Frank Marshall Davis, and we know he has all these weird aliases, he converted to Islam, he wears an Islamic ring, all of this is real.
Has led us to this point. Maybe Jones will never be family friendly enough to have his own Disney on Ice special, although how glorious would that be? It would be really fun to say whatever you wanted without consequence. Like if we suggested that Jack Dorsey thought his algorithm was actually a hive queen benevolently feeding the public through its actions, but that's crazy. and it's fun to say, but it doesn't make it right. But it was only a matter of time before this entire spectacle came full circle and Joe Rogan reappeared on InfoWars.
I don't care if you're heterosexual or homosexual. You're trying, if you come up to a park, like they do in these videos, and tell my child what sex they are, and try to talk to my daughter or son about sex, and they're a little kid, you know.
Crazy. Kids don't even know what the f they are.
And the thing is, we're guilty of this too. Alex Jones is one of those rare birds that's entertaining to watch, whether you love him or hate him. And the fact that he's as famous as he is makes him all the more fascinating. But what he says does matter, because it has real-world consequences. Joe may think that he did his due diligence by holding Jones' hand through his Sandy Hook apology, but the results of his fear-mongering are devastating. The parents of the children who were slaughtered in Sandy Hook had to face a horrific reality we can never try and comprehend. And then to saddle them with the disgusting slander that their kids were either crisis actors on top of that, denying them the opportunity to grieve the lives of their lost children because they started to be harassed by people who believe Jones' conspiracy theory, isn't just evil, it's heartbreaking. It reached the point that one of the parents of the Sandy Hook victims took his own life. And knowing that, it's really difficult to keep finding Alex Jones funny, or want to be his friend. Or worse yet, give him a bigger platform.
This was a fun podcast. It was fun. This is what I wanted people to see.
But this story doesn't have a sad ending, because the families of Sandy Hook are fighting back. They launched a class action lawsuit against Alex Jones and InfoWars that has already created some of the funniest moments of Jones' career.
Every last word of factual claim in those statements are things that you repeated with no confirmation from people you now admit are crazy, right?
Well, I don't want to call people crazy and get sued by somebody else. I have found that that some of what they said and the reports they put out were not accurate.
Jones has already had to claim that his entire show and character is an act, and better yet, that the entire Sandy Hook episode was a form of psychosis. So on July 1st and 2nd, be sure to tune in when Alex Jones is expected to give his deposition in court. Because maybe it's a wacky conspiracy theory, but we're guessing it's going to be the best performance of his career.
And I'm not a victim. I'm glad this is happening, quite frankly. I love it. I'm not a sadomasochist. I'm not into pain, but if it means pain to get something done, I'll do it all day long.
There were 9.6 million emails that were searched. We turned over about 57,000 of them. In 12 of them, there were embedded images of child pornography.
The great lords Kyle C. and Ricky Pilgrim, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. The quote from one of our knights this week comes from Alibin Dudayev. Elie Wiesel says that the greatest evil in the world is not anger or hatred, but indifference. So we're going to put up the full versions of our interviews with Rebecca Lewis and Jared Holt, as well as some behind-the-scenes bloopers, the making of, and all the craziness that went into making this entire spectacle.
Experience motion, so there's not much more we can say about that. If you want to like, comment, share, subscribe.
Yeah, all that good stuff. Yeah,
helps us a lot.
Tell your friends.
Tell your friends. If you can support as little as $1 to the Patreon, it also helps make this entire Dumpster Fire possible.
Absolutely.
Yes, and let's just have an open and fair dialogue around the world.
Yeah, have a dialogue with everybody, even the ocean creatures. Yes. They need our help more than anything.
You can live in whale. The greatest of whales.